The tournament hall was alive with noise that afternoon. Fighters moved around the arena stretching their arms, practicing kicks in the air, and warming up their bodies for the matches ahead. The smell of sweat and determination filled the room, and the crowd sitting in the stands buzzed with excitement. Everyone knew this was not just another martial arts gathering. Some of the most respected fighters had come together, and among them was a man whose reputation had already begun to feel almost mythical. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee stood quietly near the edge of the training area. Unlike many fighters who warmed up loudly and aggressively, he seemed calm and focused, as if the noise of the arena barely touched him. His movements were relaxed, almost effortless. Yet there was a sharp precision in everything he did. Every stretch, every small motion looked controlled and purposeful. Even people who had never seen him fight before could sense that this was someone different. Not far away stood another martial artist who was already earning attention for his skill and presence. Jim Kelly. Tall, athletic, and confident Jim Kelly carried himself like a man who had nothing to prove. His powerful kicks and quick movements had already impressed many fighters in the room. People knew he was fast. Very fast. Some even whispered that his speed might rival the fastest fighters in the tournament. As the fighters moved around the warm-up area, small groups of spectators and competitors gathered closer, quietly watching the two men who now stood within a few steps of each other. There was no official match announced between them. No referee had called them to the ring. Yet something about the moment felt important, as if the entire room sensed that a small but unforgettable test was about to unfold. Jim Kelly looked toward Bruce Lee with a calm smile. It wasn't a mocking smile or an arrogant one. It was the expression of a fighter who believed deeply in his own ability. After years of training and competition, confidence came naturally to him. He stepped slightly closer and spoke in a relaxed tone, just loud enough for the nearby fighters and spectators to hear. "I'm faster than you." The words floated through the air and instantly changed the atmosphere around them. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Fighters paused their warm-ups. Even people who had been looking elsewhere slowly turned their heads. Anyone who understood martial arts knew exactly what that statement meant. Speed in combat is everything. The fighter who moves first and strikes first often controls the entire fight. And now someone had just claimed to be faster than Bruce Lee. Many people expected Bruce Lee to react immediately. Some thought he might laugh. Others expected a sharp response or a quick challenge. But Bruce Lee did none of those things. Instead, he simply looked at Jim Kelly for a brief moment. His face remained calm and almost unreadable, as if the statement hadn't surprised him at all. Those who knew Bruce Lee well understood something important about him. He rarely argued about skill. Words meant very little to him. To Bruce Lee, ability was something that revealed itself through action, not conversation. If someone believed they were faster, stronger, or more skilled, the best answer was always demonstration. Around them, the tension quietly grew. Fighters who had been stretching a moment earlier now stood still, pretending not to stare but clearly watching every movement. A few spectators leaned forward in their seats. The room, once loud with activity, began to feel strangely quiet. Bruce Lee slowly shifted his stance. The motion was subtle, so subtle that many people might have missed it if they blinked. His feet adjusted slightly on the floor. His shoulders relaxed. His hands lifted just a little, hanging naturally but ready. It wasn't a dramatic fighting pose. It looked almost casual, yet every part of his body appeared perfectly balanced. Jim Kelly rolled his shoulders and stepped forward half a pace. His confidence hadn't faded. In fact, his expression suggested curiosity more than anything else. For him, this wasn't about disrespect. Martial artists often tested each other's abilities. It was a way of learning, a way of understanding, where each fighter truly stood. But the crowd sensed something bigger unfolding. 17 seconds. That was all the time it would take. At first, nothing happened. The two men stood facing each other, measuring distance and timing. Experienced fighters in the room recognized the silent exchange taking place. Both men were reading body language, studying balance, and searching for the smallest signal of movement. Bruce Lee's eyes remained fixed and focused. He watched everything. The way Jim Kelly shifted his weight, the rhythm of his breathing, the slight tension in his shoulders. To an untrained eye, it looked like stillness. But in reality, it was a moment of intense calculation. Then Jim Kelly made a small movement. It was the kind of shift that most people would never notice. Just a slight adjustment of balance, a tiny preparation for motion, but Bruce Lee saw it instantly. What happened next occurred so quickly that many people in the room struggled to understand what they had witnessed. Bruce Lee exploded into motion with astonishing speed. His body moved like a sudden flash of energy, each action flowing seamlessly into the next. There was no wasted movement, no hesitation, only pure efficiency. Gasps burst from different parts of the crowd. Some spectators leaned forward in shock. Others blinked rapidly, trying to replay the moment in their minds. Even fighters who had spent their lives studying combat looked at each other with expressions of disbelief. Because Bruce Lee's speed wasn't just impressive, it was overwhelming. In those brief seconds, the arena had witnessed something rare. The difference between great speed and legendary speed. Jim Kelly, a martial artist known for his athletic ability and lightning kicks, had just experienced firsthand what so many people had heard about but rarely seen so clearly. 17 seconds earlier, he had calmly stated that he was faster than Bruce Lee. Now the crowd didn't need anyone to explain what had happened. The answer had already been delivered. The tournament hall vibrated with a unique energy that only martial artists truly understand. It was not simply noise or excitement. It was the tension of discipline, pride, and years of training gathering under one roof. Fighters from different styles walked across the polished floor, stretching their arms, rotating their shoulders, testing their balance. Some practiced slow punches in the air, feeling the alignment of their bodies. Others snapped sharp kicks that sliced through the space with crisp sounds. The crowd sitting around the arena watched everything closely, whispering among themselves whenever they noticed a particularly skilled movement. Among the fighters present that day, one name carried a powerful weight that almost everyone recognized: Bruce Lee. Even before stepping fully into the spotlight of cinema, Bruce Lee had already become a figure that martial artists spoke about with fascination. His reputation for incredible speed, precision, and philosophy about combat had traveled far beyond the places he trained. Some fighters admired him deeply. Others felt curious, wondering if the stories about his speed were exaggerated. A few quietly hoped for the chance to test him. Not far from where Bruce Lee stood was another martial artist who carried his own growing reputation: Jim Kelly. Tall, strong, and unmistakably confident, Jim Kelly had the kind of physical presence that naturally drew attention. His athletic frame and calm attitude reflected years of disciplined training in karate. Fighters who had seen him perform before knew he possessed impressive agility and powerful kicks. His movements were smooth and controlled, yet explosive, when needed. The warm-up area had become a small stage of its own. Fighters moved in circles around each other, occasionally exchanging respectful nods. Some introduced themselves, others simply watched quietly. In gatherings like this, respect was often communicated through observation rather than conversation. Martial artists could read each other through posture, stance, and the rhythm of movement. Bruce Lee stood quietly near one side of the floor, moving through a series of relaxed motions that looked almost effortless. His arms flowed through controlled strikes that stopped suddenly in midair, demonstrating incredible control over speed and power. Even the way he shifted his weight from one foot to another revealed balance that came from years of training. His expression remained calm, focused inward rather than outward. A few fighters nearby kept glancing at him, studying his form. Some whispered small comments to each other about how fast his hands looked even during casual warm-ups. One spectator leaned forward in his seat, trying to see if the stories about Bruce Lee's famous speed were visible even before a real match began. Across the room, Jim Kelly was finishing a short warm-up of his own. His kicks cut sharply through the air with strong snapping sounds that echoed lightly in the hall. Each motion looked precise and athletic. His body moved with the relaxed confidence of someone who trusted his own abilities completely. Several people watching him nodded in approval, clearly impressed. The space between Bruce Lee and Jim Kelly slowly began to shrink as fighters naturally shifted positions around the warm-up area. Neither man appeared to be intentionally approaching the other, yet soon they stood only a few steps apart. The moment was subtle, but people nearby started noticing. Two highly skilled martial artists, both known for speed, both confident in their abilities. A few spectators quietly nudged each other and pointed in their direction. Fighters who had been stretching nearby slowed their movements, pretending to continue their exercises while keeping their attention fixed on the pair. Jim Kelly glanced toward Bruce Lee with a relaxed expression. There was no hostility in his face, only curiosity mixed with confidence. In martial arts culture, moments like this were not unusual. Fighters often tested each other's abilities through friendly challenges or demonstrations. Bruce Lee returned the glance briefly, his eyes sharp yet calm. His body language remained relaxed, giving no sign that he felt challenged or threatened. Jim Kelly stepped slightly closer. The movement itself was small, but it drew the attention of several people standing nearby. Conversations faded as a few fighters quietly turned their heads. For Jim Kelly, speed was one of his strongest qualities. His training had built powerful legs and quick reflexes that made his techniques difficult to predict. Many opponents had already struggled to react quickly enough when facing him. Standing only a few feet from Bruce Lee, Jim Kelly allowed a small smile to appear on his face. It was not the kind of smile meant to provoke anger. Instead, it carried the calm confidence of someone who had spent years proving himself in competition. Fighters understood this expression well. It meant someone believed deeply in their own ability. In a clear but relaxed voice, Jim Kelly spoke. "I'm faster than you." The words were not shouted across the room, they were spoken casually. Yet they traveled quickly through the surrounding space. Several fighters who had been stretching suddenly stopped their movements. A few spectators leaned forward in their seats. The statement carried weight because of who it was directed toward. Bruce Lee's reputation for speed had become legendary among martial artists. Stories circulated about how quickly he could strike, how his punches seemed to appear before opponents even realized he had moved. Some people claimed his hands were too fast for the eye to follow. Now someone had openly claimed to be faster. The nearby fighters exchanged quick glances with each other. Some raised their eyebrows slightly, clearly intrigued by the boldness of the remark. Others folded their arms and waited to see what would happen next. Bruce Lee remained completely still. There was no flash of irritation in his expression, no defensive reaction. Instead, he simply looked at Jim Kelly for a moment. His gaze was focused yet calm, as if he were studying something rather than reacting emotionally. People who knew Bruce Lee's personality understood something important in that moment. He rarely argued about skill through words. To him, martial arts were about demonstration, about showing ability through movement rather than debate. The room around them seemed to grow quieter. Jim Kelly kept his relaxed posture, showing no sign of doubt. He was not mocking Bruce Lee or trying to embarrass him. In the world of martial arts, such statements were often invitations, a way to spark a brief test of skill. Several fighters moved slightly closer without making it obvious. They wanted a better view while pretending to continue their warm-ups. Bruce Lee slowly shifted his weight onto his back foot. The movement was subtle, almost invisible unless someone was watching carefully. His hands rose slightly in front of his body, relaxed but ready. His shoulders remained loose, giving the impression of effortless balance. Jim Kelly watched closely. He understood the silent language of fighters. A stance adjustment meant readiness. A relaxed posture meant confidence. Every tiny movement revealed something about a martial artist's mindset. Around them, the tension continued to build. A few spectators in the front rows leaned forward, sensing that something interesting was about to happen. One judge standing nearby crossed his arms, curious but calm. Jim Kelly rolled his shoulders lightly, maintaining his confident expression. His stance remained casual, but there was alertness in his posture. Years of training had conditioned his body to respond quickly when needed. Bruce Lee's eyes remained focused on him. There was no anger in his face, only concentration. For a few seconds, neither man moved. To an untrained observer, the stillness might have seemed uneventful. But experienced fighters watching nearby understood exactly what was happening. Both men were reading each other, studying balance, breathing patterns, and the smallest hints of intention. It was the silent conversation of martial artists. Jim Kelly's bold claim hung in the air, echoing through the quiet attention of everyone nearby. The challenge had been spoken. Now everyone waited to see how Bruce Lee would respond. The moment the words left the mouth of Jim Kelly, the air inside the tournament hall changed in a way that everyone nearby could feel. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but something in the atmosphere shifted. Conversations slowed. A few fighters stopped stretching mid-movement. The casual energy of the warm-up floor quietly transformed into focused attention. "I'm faster than you." The statement had been simple, calm, and confident. It carried no shouting, no aggression, yet it carried weight because of the man standing in front of him, Bruce Lee. For a brief second after the words were spoken, many people expected an immediate reaction. Some thought Bruce Lee might smile. Others imagined he might respond with a witty remark. A few even expected a sudden demonstration of speed right there on the spot. But Bruce Lee did none of those things. Instead, he simply stood there. His posture remained relaxed, almost casual. His shoulders stayed loose and his breathing appeared calm and steady. If someone had walked into the room at that exact moment without knowing what had just been said, they might have thought nothing unusual was happening. Yet for the fighters, watching closely, the stillness itself was the reaction. Bruce Lee slowly turned his head toward Jim Kelly, his eyes settling on him with quiet focus. There was no anger in his gaze, no visible challenge. His expression remained neutral, the kind of calm that came from deep self-control. Jim Kelly held his ground confidently. He did not step back or change his posture. His face carried a slight smile that reflected belief in his own abilities. Years of karate training had built his speed, balance, and athletic confidence. He was not someone who made empty claims. The two men stood only a few feet apart, surrounded by fighters and spectators who now watched with growing curiosity. Bruce Lee said nothing. That silence spoke louder than any response could have. For Bruce Lee, martial arts were never about arguing with words. His philosophy had always centered on direct experience. Instead of debating who was faster or stronger, he believed the truth revealed itself through movement. Those who had trained with him before recognized that look in his eyes. It was the look he had when he was observing, analyzing, calculating. His attention moved across Jim Kelly's posture, the way a scientist studies a problem. Bruce Lee's eyes noticed everything: the alignment of Kelly's shoulders, the positioning of his feet, the subtle tension in his arms, the rhythm of his breathing. To the average spectator, Jim Kelly simply looked relaxed and confident. But to Bruce Lee, every tiny movement was information. Jim Kelly shifted his weight slightly from one leg to the other. It was a natural adjustment, the kind fighters make constantly while standing. Yet Bruce Lee noticed the change immediately. Nearby, a few martial artists who understood high-level combat began to watch more closely. They knew what Bruce Lee was doing. He was reading. Speed in martial arts was not just about moving quickly. True speed came from anticipation. The fighter who could read an opponent's intention before the movement fully began always held the advantage. Bruce Lee's calm observation revealed that he was not reacting emotionally to the statement. Instead, he was gathering information. The room around them grew quieter. A fighter practicing kicks nearby slowed down until his movements almost stopped completely. Another martial artist pretended to stretch his legs while clearly watching the two men from the corner of his eye. Even a few spectators in the first rows of the arena leaned forward slightly, sensing that something important might happen. Jim Kelly noticed the attention, but did not seem uncomfortable with it. His confidence remained steady. He had spoken honestly about what he believed. In his mind, this was simply a moment between two skilled martial artists testing their abilities. Bruce Lee's stance began to shift almost invisibly. His right foot moved a fraction of an inch, adjusting his balance. His knees relaxed slightly, lowering his center of gravity just enough to prepare for quick movement. His hands lifted a little higher, still loose but ready. None of these motions were dramatic. They were so small that many people would not have noticed them at all. But to trained eyes, the changes were significant. Bruce Lee was preparing. Jim Kelly studied him carefully. His own experience allowed him to recognize the readiness forming in Bruce Lee's posture. The relaxed calmness was still there, but beneath it lay a coiled energy waiting to be released. For a moment, neither man spoke. Bruce Lee continued watching. His eyes focused not just on Jim Kelly's face but on his entire body. He paid attention to the way Kelly's shoulders rose slightly when he inhaled. He noticed the subtle flex of muscles along his arms. Even the slight tightening of his jaw became information. This was Bruce Lee's method. Observe everything. Ignore nothing. React only when the moment is perfect. Jim Kelly's confidence did not disappear under that quiet scrutiny. In fact, it seemed to strengthen his curiosity. Standing in front of Bruce Lee gave him the rare opportunity to measure himself against someone whose speed had become legendary among fighters. The distance between them remained small. Around them, the audience of fighters and spectators silently expanded as more people realized what was happening. Without drawing attention to themselves, several martial artists drifted closer, forming a loose circle around the pair. Nobody wanted to interrupt. Nobody wanted to miss what might happen next. Bruce Lee remained silent throughout it all. The silence itself became powerful. Some people in the crowd began to understand something about Bruce Lee's personality through that quiet reaction. He was not someone who needed to defend his reputation with words. Confidence built through years of discipline often showed itself through calm rather than confrontation. Jim Kelly's statement had created the moment. Bruce Lee's silence was shaping what came next. Jim Kelly adjusted his stance slightly, widening his feet for better balance. The motion was small, but natural. His shoulders rolled once as he loosened tension from his arms. Bruce Lee's eyes followed every detail. The arena lights reflected faintly off the polished floor as both men stood facing each other, their presence drawing the attention of everyone nearby. For several seconds, time seemed to stretch. Nothing dramatic happened. No strikes were thrown. No loud challenges were made. Yet the tension continued building because everyone sensed the possibility of action. Bruce Lee's breathing remained slow and controlled. His posture reflected total readiness without aggression. His calm observation revealed a deep truth about his approach to martial arts. Speed was not just physical for him. It was mental clarity combined with perfect timing. He waited. He watched. He measured every detail in front of him. Jim Kelly maintained his confident expression, standing tall and balanced. His muscles were relaxed but ready, reflecting the preparation of a trained competitor. Around them, the quiet circle of observers remained completely focused on the two fighters, watching the silent exchange that had begun with a simple claim about speed. The silence around the two fighters had grown so thick that even small sounds seemed louder than usual. The faint shuffle of a shoe on the polished floor, the quiet breath of a nearby spectator, the distant echo of someone practicing a kick on the far side of the hall, all of it faded into the background as attention locked onto the two men standing only a few feet apart. The bold claim from Jim Kelly still hung in the air, and everyone nearby sensed that something extraordinary was about to happen. Bruce Lee remained calm, his posture relaxed yet perfectly balanced. His eyes never left Jim Kelly. They moved slightly, studying details the way a master craftsman studies a tool before using it. Bruce Lee wasn't simply looking at his opponent. He was reading him. The small shifts in weight, the subtle tightening of muscles, the rhythm of breathing. Every signal became information. Jim Kelly stood tall with confidence, his shoulders loose but ready. His training had taught him to remain composed in moments like this. He knew the importance of balance, timing, and speed. His claim had not been made carelessly. He believed in the power of his reflexes and the explosive speed of his techniques. Around them, the gathering circle of fighters and spectators held their breath in quiet anticipation. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Both men remained still, measuring distance. To an untrained eye, it might have looked like hesitation, but experienced fighters in the room understood exactly what was taking place. This was the moment of calculation that came before movement. The instant where awareness sharpened and the mind became completely focused. Bruce Lee's weight shifted ever so slightly. It was almost invisible, a subtle adjustment of stance that aligned his body for explosive motion. His knees relaxed just enough to lower his center of gravity. His hands floated naturally in front of him, neither rigid nor loose. Jim Kelly noticed the shift and responded with one of his own. His right foot slid a fraction forward as his shoulders squared. His posture showed readiness without aggression, the quiet signal of someone prepared to react quickly. The tension rose. Several fighters watching nearby leaned forward slightly without realizing it. One man who had been stretching froze mid-motion, his eyes fixed on the two martial artists. Even the spectators in the front rows of the arena seemed to sense that the next few seconds might reveal something unforgettable. Bruce Lee's gaze sharpened. He noticed a tiny movement in Jim Kelly's shoulders, a subtle tightening that suggested preparation. It was the kind of signal most people would never detect. But Bruce Lee's training had refined his perception to extraordinary levels. Time seemed to slow. Jim Kelly shifted his weight again, preparing to move. And in that instant, everything changed. Bruce Lee moved. The motion erupted with a speed so sudden that several people watching could barely process what their eyes were seeing. One moment he had been standing calmly, and the next his body exploded into action with astonishing precision. His footwork was incredibly fast, covering the short distance between them almost instantly. His arms moved like flashes of lightning, striking the air with perfect timing and control. Gasps burst from the small crowd. A few spectators instinctively leaned forward, their eyes widening in disbelief. Others blinked rapidly, trying to follow movements that seemed to blur together. Jim Kelly reacted quickly. His own reflexes were impressive. But Bruce Lee's speed operated on a completely different level. Each movement flowed seamlessly into the next. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, only fluid efficiency. Bruce Lee's techniques demonstrated something more than just speed. They revealed precision. Every motion had purpose. Every strike stopped exactly where it needed to stop. His control over distance and timing was so exact that it created the illusion of multiple actions happening simultaneously. The entire sequence unfolded in seconds, 17 seconds. That was all it took for the demonstration to reveal the difference between confidence and mastery. The room erupted with murmurs of amazement. Several fighters looked at each other with expressions of disbelief, silently acknowledging what they had just witnessed. Even those who had heard stories about Bruce Lee's legendary speed seemed surprised by how overwhelming it looked in person. Jim Kelly stepped back slightly, his expression shifting from calm confidence to focused awareness. He had reacted quickly, but the speed of Bruce Lee's movement had clearly surprised him. Bruce Lee returned to a relaxed stance almost immediately. Just as quickly as the motion had begun, it ended. His shoulders loosened again. His breathing remained steady. His hands dropped slightly to his sides as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But the crowd knew something extraordinary had happened. Spectators whispered to each other, trying to describe what they had just seen. Some spoke about the incredible speed of Bruce Lee's strikes. Others discussed how smoothly his movements flowed together without interruption. A few fighters quietly nodded to themselves, recognizing the years of training required to develop that level of skill. The demonstration had not been about overpowering an opponent. It had been about revealing the truth behind the claim. Jim Kelly stood still for a moment, processing the experience. As a trained martial artist, he understood what he had just witnessed. Speed in martial arts was not simply about moving fast. It was about timing, anticipation, and efficiency combined into a single seamless motion. Bruce Lee had shown all of those qualities in a matter of seconds. The surrounding fighters remained captivated. Some of them had trained for decades, yet the display they had just seen reminded them how deep the art of combat truly went. Bruce Lee's ability to combine speed with control created something that felt almost unreal. A few spectators in the audience shook their heads in amazement. They had expected something interesting when the claim about speed had been made. But they had not expected such a clear demonstration of skill. Bruce Lee's posture remained relaxed. There was no sense of arrogance in his expression, no sign that he felt the need to celebrate the moment. His calm demeanor suggested that to him, the demonstration had simply been a natural response. Jim Kelly's statement had sparked the test. Bruce Lee's movement had provided the answer, and the crowd, stunned by what they had witnessed, continued, whispering to each other as they tried to replay the 17 seconds that had unfolded before their eyes. The reaction from the people surrounding the two fighters did not explode all at once. Instead, it spread through the tournament hall like a slow wave of realization. At first there were only small sounds, sharp breaths, quiet gasps, and the soft murmur of voices trying to understand what their eyes had just witnessed. 17 seconds earlier, the atmosphere had been curious and slightly tense after the bold claim made by Jim Kelly. Now the mood had shifted into something very different. People were stunned. A few spectators in the front rows leaned toward each other, whispering quickly, their faces still showing surprise. Some fighters standing nearby looked down at the floor for a moment, replaying the movement in their minds. Others kept their eyes fixed on the calm figure standing in front of them, Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee had already relaxed his posture again. His shoulders were loose, his breathing steady, his expression calm as if nothing unusual had happened. The explosive motion that had just unfolded seconds earlier had vanished from his body, replaced by the same quiet composure he carried before the moment began. That contrast made the demonstration even more impressive. One moment he had moved with incredible speed, delivering a flurry of perfectly controlled techniques that blurred in the eyes of many observers. The next moment he stood calmly again, balanced and relaxed as though the burst of movement required almost no effort at all. Several fighters exchanged quick glances. These were not beginners. Many of them had trained for years, some for decades. They understood speed, timing, and control. Yet what they had just witnessed clearly existed on a level that few people ever reached. A martial artist standing near the edge of the warm-up floor slowly shook his head, still trying to process it. He had watched closely from the beginning of the exchange, and even with trained eyes he had struggled to follow every motion Bruce Lee made. Another fighter folded his arms, nodding slightly to himself. His expression reflected respect rather than surprise. To him, the moment confirmed something he had heard many times before, that Bruce Lee's speed was not just rumor or exaggeration. Jim Kelly stood facing Bruce Lee, his posture still strong but noticeably more thoughtful now. His earlier confidence had not vanished, but the expression on his face showed the awareness of someone who had just experienced something unexpected. He was not embarrassed. He was learning. Jim Kelly understood martial arts deeply enough to recognize genuine skill when he saw it. What Bruce Lee had displayed in those few seconds was not merely quick movement. It was a combination of speed, timing, efficiency, and control, working together in perfect harmony. The surrounding fighters continued whispering among themselves. Some discussed how quickly Bruce Lee had closed the distance. Others tried to describe the fluid way his strikes flowed from one technique to another without pause. A few people attempted to imitate the motion quietly with their hands, realizing immediately how difficult it would be to replicate. In the stands, several spectators leaned forward with wide eyes, their attention locked onto the two martial artists who had just created the unforgettable moment. The realization slowly spread through the room. Jim Kelly had spoken with confidence when he claimed to be faster. But Bruce Lee had answered without speaking at all. His demonstration had provided the response. A young fighter standing nearby stared at Bruce Lee with open admiration. He had grown up hearing stories about legendary martial artists, but seeing that kind of speed with his own eyes felt completely different. Even the judges present in the hall seemed intrigued. One of them adjusted his glasses and leaned slightly toward another official, quietly sharing a few words. Both men nodded with interest, clearly impressed by the display they had just witnessed. Bruce Lee remained silent. He did not step forward to explain anything. He did not comment on Jim Kelly's earlier claim. Instead, he simply stood there calmly, allowing the moment to settle naturally in the minds of everyone watching. His philosophy had always been simple in situations like this. Let the movement speak. Jim Kelly took a slow breath, his eyes still focused on Bruce Lee. The experience had clearly captured his attention. As a martial artist who valued growth and understanding, he recognized that moments like this were rare opportunities to learn. The confidence that had inspired his earlier statement had not disappeared entirely, but it had been reshaped into respect. The crowd around them continued reacting in small ways. A few people quietly applauded under their breath. Others exchanged impressed smiles. Some fighters who had initially been skeptical about Bruce Lee's legendary reputation now looked at him with a new level of appreciation. The arena itself seemed to hold the echo of the demonstration. 17 seconds. That brief moment had revealed something powerful about martial arts mastery. Speed alone was not enough. True mastery came from understanding movement at a deeper level, knowing when to act, and how to control every detail of the action. Bruce Lee's calm presence reinforced that lesson. He stood with the same relaxed posture he had shown before the exchange began, his body language almost effortless. Anyone looking at him now might never guess that he had just moved with astonishing speed moments earlier. Jim Kelly's earlier statement about being faster had sparked the test. The crowd had witnessed the result. Several fighters quietly stepped back to give the two men more space, still watching with interest but also showing respect. No one wanted to interrupt the natural conclusion of the moment. Bruce Lee's gaze drifted briefly across the room, noticing the attention surrounding him. Yet he showed no sign of pride or arrogance. His calm demeanor suggested that demonstrations like this were simply part of the ongoing journey of martial arts. For him, skill was something to practice constantly rather than something to boast about. Jim Kelly remained thoughtful, absorbing what he had just experienced. The crowd, still whispering among themselves, had clearly reached the same realization. They had not merely seen a fast fighter. They had just witnessed the true speed of Bruce Lee.